My name's Jim Sutterfield. I'm the supervisor at the Veterans Workshop. We're trying to open this service station up to train the patients to get a job outside the hospital. First day we opened up, it was hell. They were scared to death, and I was scared to death. And then and after, like anything else, you get self-confidence after you stay out here a while. Now then, they can do anything. Jack Scott, he started with me, and he's an eager beaver. I put him on date, give him a raise.
Well, I felt that if I was going to get out of the hospital, that I would need a job for preparation on leaving the hospital. And this is one of the ace in the hole that I found.
What's your future plan?
Well, my future plan now is to stay there for a year. And then if things work out any other way, maybe longer.
You move in many different areas. We've got a lot of different occupations, a lot of different jobs that we can train you for.
One of my other main problems, I haven't been able to get a job. Because when they find out I've been in the mental hospital, that cuts my chances.
Right in half. Yeah. This is a good point. Now, you've got a job history now. You've been working for the Vets Workshop. It's independent. It's not a hospital. You've got a work history. You're going to be working. You're working 8 hours a day. If you want to go out.
We are sitting down in group meetings, discussing the problems of living outside, of working outside, and the person serving as a therapist is an ex-patient, a patient who has left the hospital and has successfully maintained himself out in the community for 6 or more months.
Where if you were in the hospital and not working, when they put down your, what you've been doing the last few months, you have to say nothing. But now you can say we worked in the Veterans Workshop.
We can release patients, but we have yet to decipher the code for keeping them out. And I think this is the major problem right now in mental health.
In the early part of 1963, we wanted to start a behavior modification laboratory in Menlo Park in the Veterans Hospital. At this time, the only ward that was available was a very chronic back ward. Most of the patients were 20 to 30-year veterans of the hospital.
They were completely institutionalized, apathetic, indifferent. Nothing was going on. They were lying around on the ground, sitting around in big chairs. Absolutely nothing was happening. And the great majority of them didn't go out on passes. They didn't smoke cigarettes. They had no vices whatsoever, except sleeping. We found that sleeping on the ward was something they always did. Some patients tended to feed animals. That's about the only interaction they had with any living thing. Patients who had been here 43 years, living together in the same wards, didn't know each other's name.
Consequently, what we did was to look around for a group technique. The technique that we found to be most effective was a technique called reinforcement therapy or operant conditioning. The essence of this technique was that the behavior of the patient, the behavior that we wanted to lessen or weaken, we ignored.
But we had to get them doing something first. So we decided to make their sleeping on the ward a reward. In order to sleep on the ward, they had to go out and do some work that we considered therapeutic. They had to gain, in other words, some tokens. So we used tokens, like money, as a generalized reward. So they earned the tokens, then they could do the things they wanted. And slowly, bit by bit, we encompassed everything in their lives.
People can earn tokens by getting up in the morning, shaving, being well-groomed, and as they go to breakfast in the morning, the ward psychologist looks the patients over, and if they're well-groomed, he says, well done, and at the same time hands them 2 tokens.
Legs, you look sharp. Look good.
We have a small canteen on the ward. The patients go in, exchange 2 tokens for 1 pack of cigarettes, but The whole purpose of tokens is to earn them and then use them wherever they seem to be of value to that particular patient.
2 please. Togomar. Total this one out. Total this one out. I think I might stunt my growth. 1 pack, please.
Okay. Straight with the bookcase? Okay, you can start that. That one over there mostly.
Patients also earn tokens by working around the ward. When there are things to do, like clean up, the nurse and nursing assistants are able to manage the ward much more efficiently by asking patients whether they want to earn tokens.
Where would you want to work? Wherever you would be. You can wipe off the chairs. How about that?
Okay, where you cloth and utility?
Yeah, in the utility room. Get a wet cloth and then you can wipe the chairs off.
The nursing assistants set values to different tasks. 1 token for sweeping, 2 tokens for cleaning the bookcases and brushing down the chairs and washing the chairs.
You fellas are finished with your job now. I give you a token. Let's see, let's check that third knife. That looks very good. Thanks, Mr. McIntyre. You did a very good job. Yeah. You finish that, I'll give you a token. You seem to give you a token. You need to dump that out.
We have an apartment or house on the grounds in this occupational therapy clinic in which patients will attend for an hour or 2 hours a day. We have people in the occupational therapy clinic who are teaching these patients how to live and take care of a house, how to live and take care of their clothes.
And go in one home. Do you want to try it now?
They're taught how to iron.
Yeah, you should iron the other side of the collar too.
Both sides. What's warm enough to top of the iron?
How to live and take care of their necessities such as eating, and how to also to buy food.
What kind of frosting do you want?
Chocolate.
Chocolate. How about you? What kind of frosting do you like on a chocolate cake?
Diabetic.
Oh, you can't eat any. Well, we've got some Jell-O we can fix. Dave, are there any appointment cards that need to be signed? How about one?
Okay.
Tom? You get a token too?
We have tried to build into the system planning, where the patient must plan ahead on what tokens they will earn during the week and how to use them. So in order to do this, we have an appointment card. The patient goes to his assignment, gets the appointment card signed by the person in charge of the program. Then at the end of the week, he comes back to the ward, and the ward psychologist adds up the total number of hours that he has worked, then pays him 2 tokens per hour for that. This is what we call the token payday. In the token exchange, he also will apply for passes and money. We have tried to tie money and passes together on the ward. We want people to go out on pass so that we give them an extra incentive of more money if they go out on pass for less tokens.
Morning. Good morning, Mr. Keating. Did you put in for a pass?
Yes.
So that's 40 tokens, and you only earn 15, so do you have some tokens in the bank?
100 in the bank.
Okay, so you need another 25, that'll leave you with 75 in the bank.
Right.
Okay. Okay, do you want to take a new work card?
Thank you.
All these patients now work 28 hours a week in our Veterans Workshop. Dr. McDonough is in charge of the Veterans Workshop.
On the hospital grounds, we have 2 workshops. One of these is involved in buffing plastic telephone housings for the Western Electric Company. Each week, we get thousands and thousands of telephone housings, and our job is to take the good housings and wash them, and then from the washing, taking them through a buffing operation, and bringing them right back up to standard. Some of these people hadn't received any paycheck for 20 years. And the first time that a man actually gets a check that says John Doe received $15, it's quite a thing to see.
We had a number of these patients leave the hospital, and they went out and worked 8 hours a day. This is something that was unheard of with this type of patient. Usually they went out to a foster home, to some relative, and all they did was sit around and watch television.
Our other on-the-grounds operation is primarily concerned with the reconditioning of telephone cords. When these cords arrive, we send them to the washing machine, and then they're hung up and dried. We have a number of men who take each one of these cords that's been washed and hand clean it. They look for cuts and bruises on the cords all the time that they're working, and then from this point the cord is sent to the electronic tester. We decided to extend our operations outside of the hospital, and a gasoline service station quite near the hospital was available for lease. And we thought that this might be a real opportunity to train people who can pump gas, fill oil tanks, wash windshields, etc., that we would be able to place many of these patients in jobs locally and make it possible for some of them to escape the hospital. We entered into a contract with the Douglas Oil Company to operate this service station, and we invested $3,000 or $4,000 of our money in equipment. As far as the patients are concerned, we bought them uniforms. I go in there and purchase my own gas, and I'm always amused when I drive in, or when anybody drives in, the patients in uniform come charging out with windshield stuff in hand, ready to tackle the car. It's pretty good. It's sort of exciting. I remember the first time I drove in as a customer, I was struck by these men being a little on the slow side. I handed them my credit card, and it seemed to me maybe they had it in their possession for about 10 minutes. I was thinking, gee, if I were just a regular customer, I'd be a little antsy by now. I'd want to be on my way. So one of the solutions to this problem was to run very routine kind of practice sessions in the hospital, where we have provided the therapist with a great number of credit card forms. We've made photostats enlarging these so that people can see them readily. The men who are going to be out in the station just fill in fictitious credit cards so that by the time they get out to the station, most of this has already been done. Jim Sutterfield, who's the manager of the station and an employee of the hospital, runs classes teaching new patients how to do lubrication, oil changes.
These things, make sure you tighten them when you put them back in, but don't put them too tight. It's hard to get out.
The business so far has been quite successful. The unique flavor of this particular operation is that we are not subcontracting work. We are actually operating our own business. So successful that Douglas Oil Station is contemplating opening another station for our patients.
Well, the big thing, I think, of the whole idea is money. Any guy likes to work, I don't care who it is, will work more and better and longer if you get paid for it. And I think that's the motivation behind all of it. Another thing, they kind of like to get out here and meet the public, I found out.
The original idea for the houses came out of a symposium. One of the rehabilitation specialists here at the hospital stood up and said, what about the workshop getting a contract from the GI Bill people of the VA to rehabilitate houses that had been abandoned by veterans in the community when they forfeited their mortgage. And this really was a fantastic idea. Before we knew it, we had some contracts to repair houses, and we've been in the business ever since. Some of these houses are really in pretty rough condition. They've been abandoned. Sometimes vandals from the community have broken in so that the windows are gone, the weeds are high. When we get a new property to work on, George Johnson, the supervisor of the crew, takes our truck and a station wagon out with the fellows who are going to be working on the property. They're divided into two crews. One is a cleanup crew. Their job is to sweep up the glass, cut the weeds down to size, give the lawn a mowing, etc., and drag the debris off the property. A lot of people don't think that mental patients are capable of this kind of work, but when you make the demand on them to do a job, you'll find that they really can produce. Now, the other crew does the physical work on the house, and when the truck drives up in front of the property and those guys pile out, it's really quite an exciting thing to see because they go right to it. We use, wherever we can, patient supervision. And after a while, these people have worked together in crews so that they each have their own little job. They know what they're doing, and they just go about it. You know, lots of times when we do houses in this area, we find that just the activity of these fellows driving up in a truck, piling out, tends to attract the neighbors, and particularly the kids. They're in full force watching us, wanting to know where the action is and what's happening. And sometimes, some of these young boys especially, when they see all this activity, want to join in and help out.
We've noticed quite frequently, we would go into an area and the house would be run down. Immediately, we would cut the weeds down for a starter. Pretty soon we would see that neighbors, they're cutting their weeds down. As we paint, they would paint. And I think this is very good because it brings up the area, regardless what area you go in.
It looks like a big change from last week. I'm really amazed. What's the timetable look like, George?
Well, it's in pretty bad shape, but all in all, we're doing pretty good.
Okay. What about the inside?
Well, there's a lot of potholes in the drywall. Vandals kicked all the plugs out, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll probably get an electrician in here and fix those before I can put in drywall.
Yeah. We're going to have to scrape the floors or just...
We can rent a sander and refinish the floors because they're not buckled. These are in pretty fair shape.
It won't be much of a job this way.
I'd say a couple of days and we'd be in and out on the floors.
What kind of shape's the kitchen in?
Well, it's a wreck. The doors are busted. The cabinets, they don't work. They're sprung and they have to be replaced.
Let's figure as much as we can handle over at the hospital in the shops. You know, if we can pull the cabinets and get the most of the doors, things like anything we can do back there, let's do it. It'll ease up on the fellows around here.
Yeah.
What we do is the complete job. We're expected to replace the glass and actually have a class back at the hospital where patients are taught how to glaze.
Some of the men, they've been in the hospital 20, 30 years. And I have several on my crew that have never actually put out a good day's work since they've been in the hospital. And working with me, it has stimulated them to work, and they feel like men.
One of the problems we find is that many patients will not work. They don't want to work for money because they receive a fairly sizable pension. Usually the patients we get to work in the hospital are patients who receive very small incomes, something like
$30 a month.
This means they have to work, but where are they going to work? They don't have any training. They have 20 years of institutional living. And so if we can get them into a job that they can fill adequately, we think that they can then have the money to escape. Well, what do I mean? I think mental hospitals are not good places for most people. And most of the time, these mental patients, after they've had an acute psychotic episode, simmer down with medication into a lackluster, institutionalized way of life. And this is where I think the hospital as an institution perpetuates this thing. And when I say escape, I mean we've got to get these guys out of here, really, before it's too late. After we got started in the house renovation business, we decided if we could buy some of these properties, preferably nearby the hospital, these patients could live in groups of 4 or 5, be a family, provide the psychological support that everybody needs, and at the same time they could return to the hospital or the gas station or to the houses that are being renovated and work.
The main advantage of this house project is to rehabilitate the houses and to set them up as halfway houses. What we're trying to do is to train the patient to go into these halfway houses, maintain themselves in the community, work in the community, and move out of our halfway houses into the total community.
Now, as we move our program out into the community, we hope to have the patients in the community come back and act as sort of community therapists for the patients in the hospital, give them a picture of the problems that exist in living with other people, in living outside in the community, in working and getting up every day, working 8 hours a day. Problems that have been so much a part of the staff's life that they can't focus. They don't know just what the particular problems are that are first seem unsurmountable.
What are some of the problems, Bob? Now, you've been out.
When you start moving out, you gotta make up your mind you want out. Move out with someone. If you move out by yourself, then you're gonna be back into the hospital.
Yeah.
But if you go out with somebody, or in a group that you're planning, go together.
Yeah.
And share all expenses together. But make agreement that you will share expenses.
Now, you found very many guys that'll do that? I mean, and not pay the bill?
Well, I have a buddy that is with me. We're sharing all expenses. We share the rent, even though we buy our own groceries, because we eat different.
Is anybody here a good cook?
I don't think cooking is quite as important now because you got so many types of food that you can warm up and such. I mean, you don't have to go into big roasts and things like that. And the average person can cook a steak or a chop.
Walter, you can fill up your own time pretty well, but what were the problems that you saw that made you come back to the hospital?
Well, I think if one particular job I had, I was working too hard and long hours, and then a certain amount of loneliness, of lonesomeness. And I think what one of the big troubles sends fellows back into the hospital, they neglect to take their medication. That's the main thing. They get careless with it, or they think they don't know it and such.
Well, I think this is a good point. When you start off, then for a while you're feeling pretty good, but if you're off for a while and not working, or let's say on a weekend, you're liable to get a little bit more depressed than usual, and then this starts the ball rolling again. So this is one thing that you can do, work together, keep up these things that everyone should be doing. You people will be trainers. You will train the other fellows in the hospital
the problems of living outside. If all these fellows are ready to come out, they can come out. But the big problem is they don't know what the problems they face. Now you have a job.
These patients are much more sensitive than us, and we hope, therefore, that they, in a sense, will become the therapist and probably be much more effective therapists than we will be. There's just been some recent studies indicating that the most important thing in returning to the hospital is that they lost contact with the hospital and they couldn't get a job. There was nobody to turn to. They were alone. So we feel that bringing patients into the community in groups and keeping at first some tie on them, how long, we're not sure. We hope to eventually phase out this tie on the patients in the community and they'll operate independently. They may have emotional problems like all of us who are functioning in the community, but the main thing is to get these patients to function just like anyone else outside the hospital. What we have to do now is to go out and sell our program to the community and ask for their advice on how this can be more effective. The hospital as a separate entity, I think, is on the way out. It just is not effective. Mental health and hospitals have to move into the community.